So, the Vow of the Disciple recently launched this weekend, and I have one question. Is this the hardest raid inside of Destiny 2? Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, here with your daily dose of Destiny, and today I wanted to make a video talking about the Vow of the Disciple, the newest raid inside of Destiny 2, and a raid that I think might be one of the most challenging raids inside the entire game. And so I wanted to jump off by saying that the Vow of the Disciple is a very intricate raid. It's very interesting. I like the way that it works. I think the mechanics are very unique and they don't take too much from other raids. I think what the developers came up with was very much a unique experience, and it feels in many ways like it's its own thing. We're not even talking about some of the elements within the raid that I think are beautiful. It is probably one of the most stunning looking raids. I've always loved the aesthetic of the pyramids, and when you go inside them to do a little bit of a mission or whatever, I always thought that in the interior inside these raids are probably some of the best level design that Bungie has ever come up with. But in terms of difficulty of the raid, I have to say that this has got to be one of the most challenging raids I've ever seen. And even after my team and other teams have been able to figure it out and put out guides on how to do some of these encounters, it still goes to show that like there is a difficulty element even when you know what to do in terms of the puzzle pieces, or not the puzzle pieces, but like the pictures and the images, right? And matching them up and using those throughout pretty much every encounter. I think, yeah, it's not easy to figure out. And as I think about, you know, many of the raids inside of Destiny 2 right now, and you have your Vault of Glass, and you know, you have your Garden of Salvation, and you have your Crown of Sorrow, and things like that. I feel like there's a very clear difference. I think Crown of Sorrow might have been one of the most challenging raids at its time, and then quickly, you know, just above that might be Garden of Salvation. Those are raids that I remember participating in, and they were raids that, you know, people did not want to teach. I think Garden of Salvation is a prime example. Before this raid, Vow of the Disciple, ever came into existence, I think Garden of Salvation probably would be one of the least run raids in Destiny history, and much of that is due to the fact that it's just such a mechanically demanding raid. There's so little that you can get wrong, and so much that can go wrong in any sort of encounter in Garden of Salvation, that just made it for many people like once they got Divinity, they didn't want to do it again. And that was how it was for me. Like once I got my Divinity, like just speaking of getting the Divinity, like that, doing that quest where you had to go into the raid and do the puzzle pieces, that took me months to obtain because people just didn't want to teach. They didn't want to teach it. Like it just wasn't fun, and it was actually complicated. Plus getting through the raid itself presented its own level of challenges. So I can understand why people didn't want to really teach it. But just in terms of the mechanics and so much that could go wrong just from a mechanical perspective, it's yeah, Garden of Salvation was one of the most complicated. I think, you know, just right next to that would be Crown of Sorrow with the blessings that required a lot of communication. And sometimes I think in my experience with raid teams, there was a lot of crossover in chat because everyone needed to talk to each other, and so that presented a number of issues as well, especially if you were playing with people whose voices you weren't used to. It was hard to drown out certain people's, you know, chats because you were like, I don't know who's talking. And so Garden of Salvation was definitely up there. But when I think of the mechanical nature of Vow of the Disciple and everything that you have to do in that raid, I feel like it's one of the more challenging ones. Now, it may not be as challenging as Garden of Salvation. It may not even be as challenging as Crown of Sorrow, but I would say that it's one of the more challenging raids. And this is obviously, I'm saying this from the perspective of like not contest mode. Contest mode presents its own level of challenges, but I'd say that like even with contest mode being off, this was a tough raid. It was a very, very tough raid, but in a way that isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? You know, raids are meant to be challenging. They should be challenging. You don't want anything that's too easy, then it becomes boring. And I think it's cool to see a lot of people playing the new raid, jumping in, experiencing it for the first time, second or third, and still feeling that excitement to want to jump in and try, you know, some of these things out. I think the weapons look sick. The exotic looks awesome. and just to experience and go through that raid, you know, where it requires so much of your teamwork. I think it's nice when you finally can reach the end and obtain that grand prize and things like that. So, you know, that's really my take on the Vow of the Disciples difficulty. But until then, that's all for me. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, dropping a like is very much helpful. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like more daily dose of Destiny videos, as we talk, you know, there's a lot to talk about. You know, we cover pretty much everything in the solar system and so much more. But until then, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you're safe. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.